Yes, we've heard that a strong recession demands strong actions. But this isn't the first major recession this country has seen, and it won't be the last. When he was running for president against Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan used to say that a recession is when your neighbor loses your job, a depression is when you lose your job, and a recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his job. In 1981, Reagan was facing a very difficult economy, much like we face today. One handed him by Jimmy Carter. And yet Reagan didn't defend his expansion of government by saying he was handed a crisis by his predecessor, something we hear a lot these days. He didn't defend it because Ronald Reagan did not expand government when he got control. He shrank government. He saw it as a time to make it smaller. Ronald Reagan said in his first inaugural address, I'm quoting, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem." In President Obama's inaugural address, he essentially said government must be the solution to our problems. Well, we're in a recession again, and we have a very troubled economy. The leadership in Washington has decided it can tax and spend our way to prosperity. But that will only exacerbate our economic problems. It has to stop, and it has to stop now. Folks, a recession is when the public stops spending, and a recovery is when the government stops spending. A recession is when the government is out of control, and a recovery is when the people take back control. And a recession is when the people walk in fear, and a recovery is when the politicians walk in fear of the American people. In that first inaugural address, Ronald Reagan went on to say, "We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And this makes us special among nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted by the people. It's time to check and reverse the growth of government which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed." Today, nearly 30 years after Ronald Reagan's first inaugural address, those words are even more true. We don't work for the government works for us. Or at least it's supposed to. The only thing that stands between us and a limited government, a responsive government, is voter apathy. That is the only thing. If we lose control of this great free country and sink into European socialism, don't blame the politicians. They're just acting like politicians. That's why we have checks and balances, and that's why we have the vote. The blame belongs to us if we let them turn us into European socialists. Someone is going to control Washington and our lives, either the politicians or the American people. God give us the courage and the will to do what Americans are born to do, stand up to the government and say no. Thank you.
That's Merrill Matthews.